1901, off the coast of a small Greek island, divers searching for sponges discovered something they didn't even know the name of. Inside a pile of rusted metal recovered from a shipwreck were dozens of bronze gears stuck together. It took humanity decades to figure out what this thing was. And even today, no one can fully explain who made it or how. Across centuries and continents with no contact between them, people repeatedly accomplish things that shouldn't have been possible yet. And in more than a few cases, they did them so well that modern science still hasn't caught up. Take something as basic as a sword. In India, more than 2,000 years ago, smiths were producing a steel called woods. Steel so strong, so flexible, so capable of holding an edge, that merchants carried it across deserts and oceans, because nothing else came close. Centuries later, that steel found its way into the forges of the Middle East, where it became something even more famous. Damascus steel, blades rippling with patterns that looked almost alive. Swords that could supposedly cut through silk, floating in the air, or through another blade entirely. Soldiers who carried them were set to fight differently, knowing what was in their hands. And here's the strange part. We still don't fully know how they did it. Researchers have pulled apart the metallurgy, found traces of carbon nanotubes inside genuine Damascus blades, structures so fine they border on nanotechnology. The smiths who made them had no concept of atoms or molecular engineering. They just knew, through some combination of trial, error, and inherited instinct, exactly what fire and metal and time would do. And then, at some point, the knowledge died with them. The supply of the original ore ran out, the technique was never fully written down, and the secret disappeared. This pattern, brightness, followed by silence, is repeated over and over. In the 4th century, Roman artisans crafted a drinking goblet adorned with a scene from Greek mythology for a wealthy client. There's nothing unusual about that. But this goblet does something incredible. When you hold it up to light from the outside, it glows jade green. When you shine light on it from the inside, it turns blood red. Modern scientists have finally unraveled the goblet's secret. The glass is coated with gold and silver particles smaller than 50 nanometers in diameter, so small that instead of simply reflecting light, they actually redirect it. This is the same principle that forms the foundation of modern nanotechnology research. Roman artisans, who didn't even know what an atom was, somehow learned to grind precious metals into particles 1,000 times thinner than a human hair, and dispersed these particles within molten glass with just the right precision for the effect to actually work. To this day, no one has found a second goblet like it. Some mysteries aren't about decoration, they're about survival. If you walk around Rome today, you'll see buildings that are still standing despite 2,000 years of rain, earthquakes, and everything else. The Pantheon's dome remains the largest unreinforced concrete dome in the world. In contrast, modern concrete begins to crumble within decades. For a long time, this was accepted as an interesting historical fact, until researchers discovered something that seemed almost impossible. When seawater seeps into Roman concrete, it doesn't weaken it. On the contrary, it actually strengthens the concrete by forming new mineral crystals within the cracks, thereby sealing them. Exposed to one of the most corrosive substances on our planet, this self-healing concrete becomes even stronger over time, instead of crumbling. We've identified some of its components, volcanic ash, lime, and seawater, but we still can't fully replicate the result. If we succeed in doing so, it could change the way all coastal cities around the world are built. For now, the Romans are still outperforming us with a formula we only partially understand. And then there's the iron pillar standing in Delhi, forged around the 4th century, more than 7 meters tall, 6 tons of solid metal, sitting outside, fully exposed to monsoon rain and humid air for over 1,600 years, without a single patch of rust. Iron rusts. That's not a maybe, it's chemistry. Except this pillar simply didn't get the memo. Metallurgists eventually found the answer hiding in the composition itself, an unusual mix of phosphorus and the near-total absence of sulfur, which together formed a thin protective layer on the surface, sealing the metal off from the air almost like a shield. The technology to deliberately produce iron this pure, this resistant to corrosion, wasn't understood by modern industry until the 20th century. Indian smiths were doing it by hand 1,500 years earlier, without knowing the chemistry, just knowing it worked. Yet durability and beauty are a kind of mystery. Scale, however, is another mystery. In 1992, 4 farmers in eastern China decided to finally drain a series of ponds that, as far as they could remember, had existed in their village for a long time. Fish ponds, ordinary pools of water with nothing special about them, which no one had ever questioned. When the water receded, the landscape revealed beneath it astonished the entire archaeological world. 24 caves hand-carved from solid rock. Their walls and columns were cut so smoothly and with such precision that they looked as if they had been made by machine. To create them, someone had removed approximately 1 million cubic meters of rock, and had done so without any tools that have survived to the present day, without any historical records, and without a single clue as to who organized the labor force capable of carrying out such an excavation, or why it was done. The caves had remained hidden beneath the water for who knows how long, waiting to be discovered by people who weren't even looking for them. Which brings us back to that lump of corroded bronze pulled from the sea in 1901. For decades, it sat in a museum drawer, dismissed as some kind of broken clock. It took X-ray imaging, more than half a century later, to reveal what was actually inside. Over 30 interlocking gears, cut with a precision that wouldn't be matched again for more than 1,000 years, capable of predicting eclipses, tracking the wandering paths of the planets, even marking the 4-year cycle of the ancient Olympic Games, a mechanical computer built in Greece around 100 BC, the kind of device history says shouldn't exist until the era of clockwork, more than 1,000 years later. Whoever built it didn't invent gear technology from nothing, which means there were almost certainly other machines like it, made by the same hands or the ones that trained them, that simply never survived. One of them fell into the sea and happened to land somewhere. A sponge diver would eventually find it. How many others are still down there or buried somewhere no one's thought to dig? Every one of these stories ends the same way, not with an answer, but with the edge of one. We can describe what these objects do. We can measure their precision, analyze their chemistry, marvel at their durability. What we can't always do is explain how someone, Working by hand, centuries or millennia before the tools that should have made it possible, figured it out anyway. Maybe that's the real discomfort buried in all of this. Not that the ancient world was primitive, but that it wasn't. And somewhere out there, in a flooded cave, a sealed tomb, or the bottom of a sea nobody's searched yet, there's probably something else waiting that will make us ask the same question all over again.